The cemetery was silent until my stepmom leaned close, her perfume choking the cold air, and hissed, "Emily, don't expect a cent from your grandfather's will." Her words hit harder than the wind, and the mourners gasped as if she'd slapped me. I didn't cry. I stood program crumpling in my fist and walked away before rage could break my grief. But as I reached the edge of the grave, the lawyer's voice cut through the whispers. "Actually, there is one more item left." Victoria's smile vanished. My heart stopped. What could my grandfather have hidden from her and saved for me? The March wind still clawed at my face as I stood frozen by my grandfather's grave. Victoria's venom echoed inside me, looping louder than the pastor's blessing, louder than the soil thudding against polished wood. Don't expect a cent. For a moment, I thought I might shatter right there in front of everyone. But instead, I forced myself to stare at his name, carved deep in stone, Richard Parker, 1940, 2025. To the world, he was a titan billionaire real estate mogul man of skyscrapers, the name behind towers of steel and glass. But to me, he was the only man who ever made me feel safe. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 11, Grandpa stepped in. He didn't just give me a bedroom in his mansion. He gave me a home. He gave me guidance. He gave me hope. I remember creeping into his study at night, the air thick with cedar and the faint smoke of his old pipe. His sleeves would be rolled gold watch, glinting beneath the green glow of his banker's lamp. He'd tap a chessboard eyes sharp. "Emily the Queen is the most powerful piece, but power without wisdom is destruction. Remember that." He wasn't just teaching me chess. He was teaching me life. On summer afternoons, he'd tug me outside to the garden, ignoring Victoria's complaints about peasant chores. We'd kneel in the dirt, planting roses, and he'd smile at my mud-streaked face. "The soil humbles us," he whispered once, brushing earth from his hands. "It reminds us where real wealth begins." Victoria called it foolish. I called it love. And there were the winter's grand halls glittering with lights, not for investors, but for children. Every December, Grandpa threw scholarship dinners for kids who had nothing. I watched him kneel to shake their hands, his eyes shining with pride. To them, he wasn't a tycoon, he was a lifeline. To me, he was proof that strength could be tender. Victoria never saw that side of him. She didn't want to. For her, Richard Parker was an ATM wrapped in Armani, a ticket to power she hadn't earned. I'll never forget the day she told me, "You're just baggage." He picked up out of pity. I was 16. I locked myself in the library and cried into the pages of his books. But that night, Grandpa found me, sat down, and said softly, "Don't let her words define you. You carry my name, Emily. That's more powerful than her envy will ever be." Now, standing at his grave, I heard that memory louder than Victoria's poison. My chest ached, my fists trembled, but grief was already shifting into something sharper: determination. Victoria thought she had buried both Richard Parker and my future in the same grave. She thought I would walk away quietly, a discarded girl with nothing but memories. But she underestimated the one thing Grandpa always believed about me. I knew how to fight without raising my voice. And I wasn't done. By the time I returned to the Parker estate that evening, the sky had gone dark purple clouds, rolling heavy with rain. I thought stepping through those massive oak doors might give me comfort, a piece of Grandpa still lingering in the air. Instead, my heart stopped cold. 3 suitcases sat neatly stacked on the marble steps. Mine. My initials stitched into the fabric. My life reduced to luggage. The front doors creaked open, and there she was, Victoria, draped in a silk robe, a glass of red wine balanced like a trophy in her hand. Her smile was sweet poison. "Oh, good you're back," she purred. "Saves me the trouble of sending someone to drop those at a motel." I blinked, rain pricking my cheeks. "You can't be serious. This is my home. Grandpa wanted me here." "Correction," she said, leaning against the door frame. "It was his home. Now it's mine. And you're an uninvited guest." I tried to step past her, but she shifted, blocking the way. "Please," I whispered. "It's been 1 day since the funeral. Let me stay until I figure out where to go." Her eyes glinted cruelly. "Did you not hear me at the cemetery, sweetheart? You won't get a cent, not a roof either. Your room was a courtesy. Courtesy ends with Richard's life." She set her wineglass down and pulled a manila envelope from the console table. With theatrical precision, she held it out. "Here's the agreement your precious grandfather signed. Temporary residency for Emily Parker. Terminated upon his death." The porch light caught Richard's signature at the bottom. My chest caved in. Could he really have written this? My hands shook. "You forged this," I snapped. Victoria laughed low and sharp. "Think whatever you like. But the law will side with me. And if you're not gone in 15 minutes, security will escort you off the property like the squatter you are." Her words sliced through the rain. My throat burned. My eyes stung. But I refused to crumble in front of her. I bent, grabbed the handle of one suitcase, and steadied my voice. "You think you've won, but Grandpa never lost a battle in his life. He won't lose this one either." Her smile faltered for the first time. Just a flicker. Then the heavy doors slammed shut, the deadbolts clicking into place. One by one, the mansion's lights blinked off as though she were erasing me from every corner of the life I'd built here. I dragged my suitcases down the long driveway rain, plastering my hair to my face. My car was a dented little thing compared to the Bentleys in the garage, but it was mine. As I shoved the suitcases into the trunk, I whispered through clenched teeth, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The Lakeview Inn smelled of cigarettes and bleach. Room 112 had peeling wallpaper and a buzzing fluorescent light that made my skin crawl. I sat on the faded bedspread, hands covering my face, and finally let the sobs come. "Why, Grandpa," I whispered, "why would you leave me with her?" The silence answered back until the rotary phone on the nightstand rang shrill and startling. My heart lurched. Nobody even knew I was here. I picked up slowly. Emily, a calm voice said, "This is Benjamin Hayes. Your grandfather left instructions. He thought of everything. And trust me, all is not lost." Friday came faster than I expected, though sleep had been a stranger. Every night since that phone call, I lay awake in the motel bed, Hayes' words replaying in my head. He thought of everything. All is not lost. It became my lifeline, the single thread keeping me from unraveling completely. The morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully. My only black suit pressed with the motel iron, my hair tied back, no makeup except for a touch of lip balm. I didn't need glamour. I needed strength. As I buttoned the jacket, I whispered to the cracked mirror, "Walk in like you belong." Because you do. Hayes' office tower rose into the skyline like one of Grandpa's creations, glass gleaming steel, unyielding. My palms sweated as I entered, but the receptionist greeted me with a knowing smile. "Miss Parker, Mr. Hayes is expecting you." Those words alone felt like a victory. Victoria might have thrown me out, but here my name still carried weight. The conference room on the 28th floor smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls, and a view of the city stretched endlessly beyond the windows, a chessboard of lights and steel. I took a seat at the far end of the long table, heart hammering. Victoria was already there, dressed like a queen awaiting coronation, sleek black suit, pearls at her throat, nails lacquered crimson. She didn't even glance at me until I sat down. Then her lips curved. "Well, well," she murmured. "You actually showed up. Brave, but useless." I said nothing. Silence was my shield. Moments later, the door opened. Benjamin Hayes entered silver-haired, carrying a stack of folders under one arm. His calm presence filled the room like gravity. Behind him followed two people whose faces brought me a surge of relief. Mr. Lewis, Grandpa's longtime business partner, and Margaret Ellis, the housekeeper who had been in our family for decades. They nodded to me gently before taking seats as official witnesses. Hayes settled at the head of the table. His voice was steady, measured, the kind of voice that didn't need to shout to command attention. Thank you all for being here. Today we honor the wishes of Richard Parker. Every word in this document was his own. My duty is to ensure they are carried out without interference. Victoria adjusted her posture, crossing her legs, exuding arrogance. I noticed her attorney sitting beside her, a sharp-faced woman with a leather briefcase. Their confidence was almost palpable, as if they were already rehearsing their victory speech. I clenched my fists under the table, the weight of every moment leading here, pressing down on me. But then I remembered Grandpa's words over a chessboard. The Queen is powerful, Emily, but the Queen must be patient. So I breathed. I waited. I let Hayes begin. As his voice carried over the polished table, reading the preamble of Richard Parker's last will and testament, I felt it the shift of power, slow and silent, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Victoria didn't know it yet, but her throne was already cracking. Hayes's tone shifted from formal to deliberate, his eyes steady as he began. To my beloved wife, Victoria Parker, he read, I leave the residence on Maplewood Drive, including its furnishings and art. I also leave her my vehicles and all joint bank accounts held at First National. Victoria's smile bloomed, instantly smug and poisonous. She turned her head slightly, just enough for me to hear her whisper, See nothing for you. Heat surged in my chest, but I stayed still. Grandpa had taught me silence could be stronger than rage. Hayes continued. His pause was almost theatrical, drawing the room tighter. Those were the preliminary bequests, but Richard Parker was thorough. There are additional provisions. The atmosphere shifted. Even Victoria's attorney straightened in her chair. Hayes lifted his glasses, then read with gravity, To my granddaughter, Emily Parker, who stood by me with loyalty and love, I leave 50% of Parker Global Holdings, including all voting rights shares and dividends. The room fell into absolute silence. My breath caught. 50%. Parker Global wasn't just a company, it was an empire worth billions. My hands trembled under the table. I looked to Hayes, half expecting to see mischief in his eyes, but he only nodded calm and assured. Across the table, Victoria's nails dug so deep into the armrest I thought the leather might tear. This is absurd, she snapped, surging to her feet. She's a child. She doesn't know the first thing about running a corporation. Hayes didn't flinch. Mr. Parker's intent was explicit. He entrusted Emily with his legacy. Her lawyer tugged her sleeve, murmuring for calm, but Victoria's voice only grew sharper. This is fraud. She manipulated him when he was weak, dying. Before I could reply, Margaret Ellis leaned forward, her quiet voice cutting through the tension. I saw Mr. Parker working on this will with my own eyes, Victoria. He was strong and clear. He knew exactly what he wanted. Mr. Lewis nodded firmly. Richard anticipated every possibility. He wasn't senile, and he wasn't deceived. He chose Emily. Gasps rippled across the room. For once, Victoria's mask cracked. Her face blanched, then flushed red. You think this changes anything? She spat, pointing at me. She may have paper, but I have the house, the money, the influence. Without me, she's nothing. Hayes's calm voice cut clean through her rant. Actually, Mrs. Parker, there is more. He placed a sealed envelope on the table, sliding it toward the center. 3 weeks before his passing, Richard Parker added a conditional clause. Victoria froze. Her eyes narrowed. What clause? Hayes opened the folder, his words deliberate. If my wife, Victoria Parker, attempts to force my granddaughter, Emily Parker, out of the family estate within 1 year of my death, then all assets previously granted to her, including the mansion vehicles and bank accounts, shall be revoked and transferred to Emily Parker in full. The words detonated. For a moment, no one moved. Then Victoria let out a laugh, high-pitched, shaky. No court will honor such nonsense. Hayes leaned back, unbothered. Conditional bequests are entirely legal. This clause was witness notarized, and he pressed a button. Recorded. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. My grandfather appeared thinner than I remembered, but his eyes fierce. His voice filled the room, Victoria. If you're watching this, it means you've betrayed both me and Emily. I know your heart, it values wealth more than love. That's why I gave Emily not only half of Parker Global, but the right to claim everything if you proved me right." Tears blurred my vision. He turned his gaze to me. "Emily, you are my true heir. Carry my values, dignity, strength, compassion. If she casts you out, the estate is yours. She has no place in a legacy built on love." The screen went black. Victoria staggered, gripping the table. "You can't do this," she shrieked, voice breaking. "I am his wife. This fortune is mine." I rose slowly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "No, it was never yours. It was his, and now it's mine." The room sat in stunned silence. For the first time, I felt it not just grief, not just anger, but power. The kind Grandpa meant when he said wisdom must guide the queen. Victoria collapsed back into her chair, pale, trembling, and suddenly small. The throne she'd claimed was gone, and she knew it. The weeks that followed were a blur of headlines, court summons, and hushed gossip across every circle that once bowed to Victoria. She wasn't surrendering quietly. She hired a fleet of attorneys, all sharp suits and sharper tongues, determined to dismantle my inheritance piece by piece. They threw everything at me, claims of fraud, undue influence, even questioning my grandfather's mental capacity in his final months. Each time I sat rigid at the plaintiff's table, my stomach knotted, while their words painted me as a manipulative granddaughter, exploiting a dying man's love. But Hayes was unshakable. With each accusation, he rose calmly, peeling back their arguments with facts. Witnesses testified Mr. Lewis described Richard's clarity while drafting the will. Margaret Ellis recounted the night Victoria prepared to throw me onto the street. Doctors took the stand, confirming Richard's mental sharpness until the very end. And then came the video. The judge ordered it played for the record, and once again my grandfather's image filled the courtroom. His voice, though weaker, still carried that same authority that had once silenced boardrooms. "If Victoria forces Emily out, let this record show I anticipated her cruelty. Emily is my heir, not by pity, but by choice." The courtroom fell silent. Even Victoria's own lawyers shifted uneasily, as though the ground beneath their case had just vanished. I watched Victoria's face as the truth struck her again. Her lips trembled, her eyes darted desperately to her attorneys, but none could save her now. She rose abruptly, pointing across the room. She tricked him. She cried, her voice cracking. She poisoned his mind against me. I found my own voice steady and clear, echoing with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "No, Victoria. You poisoned yourself. Grandpa saw who you were. He gave you every chance to love him for him, not for what he owned. And you failed." Gasps swept the courtroom. For once I didn't feel small under her glare. I felt equal, no stronger. The judge's gavel struck sharp and final. This court finds the will valid and binding. All assets of Richard Parker's estate, including Parker Global Holdings, the Maplewood estate vehicles and accounts, are awarded to Emily Parker. Effective immediately. Mrs. Parker is ordered to vacate the property within 7 days. The echo of that gavel felt like thunder in my chest. Victoria collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling. The same woman who had smirked at my grief on the day of the funeral now looked hollow, her power stripped away. A week later, I stood in the grand foyer of the Maplewood estate. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colors across the marble floor. My suitcase sat by the door, not because I was leaving, but because I was returning home. Victoria passed me on her way out, dragging her designer luggage with shaking hands. For the first time, she didn't look like my enemy. She looked like someone who had lost everything because she had chosen greed over love. For a flicker of a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered her laughter at the graveside, the icy slam of the doors when she cast me into the rain. Pity had no place here. Justice did. When the last of her footsteps faded, I turned the key in the lock and whispered into the quiet halls, "I'm home, Grandpa." Later that night, I wandered into his study. His chair was empty, his book still carrying the faint scent of cedar. On the desk, neatly polished, sat his gold watch. I slipped it onto my wrist. The weight grounded me, as if his hand rested on my shoulder once more. Outside, the city lights glittered a million possibilities, and for the first time since he'd gone, I felt not only his absence, but his presence too. His legacy wasn't just the fortune, the company, the house. It was me, and I was ready. The first weeks of owning my grandfather's empire felt surreal. Reporters camped outside the gates, tabloids spun stories of the forgotten granddaughter turned heiress, and the board of Parker Global watched me with wary eyes. Some doubted me, others resented me, but all of them underestimated me. I walked into that boardroom carrying not just my name, but the lessons Grandpa had etched into me. Integrity before appearance, wisdom before power, responsibility before greed. When the chairman asked if I intended to sell my shares, I smiled steady. No, I intend to lead, just as he prepared me to. But wealth wasn't the victory, it was the responsibility. Within a month, I established the Richard Parker Scholarship Fund, granting full rides to students from families who couldn't dream of affording tuition. Standing on that stage, handing the first acceptance letters to children whose eyes glowed with hope, I felt Grandpa beside me more than ever. At night, I often worked late in his study. The gold watch ticked on my wrist, a quiet reminder of the man who believed in me when no one else did. Sometimes I caught myself whispering to the empty room, "I hope I'm making you proud." And though the walls didn't answer, the silence felt less heavy, almost warm. Victoria had tried to erase me. Instead, she erased herself. I hadn't just inherited an empire, I had inherited his legacy, and I intended to carry it forward with dignity, with strength, and with love. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any wound, but sometimes justice has a way of finding its voice, even when you feel silenced. My story isn't just about winning back an inheritance. It's about remembering that love and integrity outlast greed every single time. Have you ever faced something like this where your own family tried to erase you, but you stood your ground? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the next story might be the one you need to hear.
My name is Patricia Greer, and I'm 28 years old. If you asked me a year ago what I wanted most in life, I would have said stability. A steady job, a partner I could build with a future I didn't have to second guess. For the longest time, I thought I had that. I thought I had found the man who saw me, who valued me for being dependable, thoughtful, loyal. Turns out I was just the stepping stone he needed until something better came along. The night everything broke still replays in my head like a scene I never auditioned for. It was Franklin's birthday, and I had planned everything down to the smallest detail. The dinner reservation at an elegant restaurant downtown. The kind of place with warm lighting, violin music in the background, and servers who glide by like shadows. I wanted him to feel special, celebrated. After all, hadn't I been the one holding him up these past few years, while he tried to find himself? I bought him a custom watch, nothing gaudy, but sleek and meaningful, engraved with, "For all our times together." It wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol, a reminder that I believed in us, in him. I had even called 2 of his closest friends ahead of time, arranging for a banner, a little cake and champagne waiting at the table. They brought others too, people I didn't know well, loud social types with opinions bigger than the room. But I swallowed my unease. This was Franklin's night. When I arrived with him blindfolded for the surprise, he laughed and teased me, saying, "Patricia, you're such a sap." There was an edge in his voice, but I brushed it aside. He always teased me for being sentimental. Inside, the group cheered as we walked in. Balloons a banner, with "Happy Birthday, Franklin," clinking glasses. He basked in the attention, his smile wide, his posture tall. I watched him glow in that spotlight, and for a moment I felt proud. This is the man I've built a life with. This is us. Dinner started with appetizers, laughter bouncing across the table. Most of the jokes were inside ones from his friend group, references to nights out. I hadn't been invited to stories I didn't understand. I smiled politely, chimed in when I could, but I felt like a guest in my own partner's world. Still, I told myself this is what relationships are. Compromise. Show up, support him, even if it's not your scene. Then came the toast. It was his friend Olivia who raised her glass first. To Franklin may this year bring upgrades and endless possibilities. Everyone laughed. A ripple of knowing giggles passed around the table, eyes darting between Franklin and me. I tilted my head, forcing a polite smile. Upgrades, I asked lightly, trying not to sound small. That's when Franklin leaned back in his chair, smirk, tugging at his lips. His eyes locked on mine, cold and glinting, as though he'd been waiting for this moment. He lifted his champagne flute. To upgrading, he said, voice smooth but sharp, because life's too short to settle. Laughter erupted. His friends clapped. Olivia nearly choked on her drink. Franklin didn't laugh, though. He kept his eyes on me, watching the words cut. My fork froze midway to my mouth. A hot flush spread across my skin. Upgrading, I whispered, barely audible. He shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Come on, Patricia. Don't act surprised. We've been drifting for months. I met someone. Her name's Ava. She gets me, pushes me, unlike you. The room stilled, then Olivia piped up, too eager to twist the knife. Yeah, Patricia, don't take it the wrong way, but Franklin deserves excitement. You're sweet, but... She glanced around for backup. You're kind of predictable. Predictable. The word echoed in my skull, hammering with each heartbeat. I forced a brittle smile. So this is how you tell me. My voice wavered, but I kept it steady enough not to break. Franklin leaned forward, his expression turning patronizing. Don't be dramatic. This isn't cheating. We've been over for a while, at least emotionally. I tried to hint, but you never picked up. Ava just happened. He sipped his drink like he hadn't just detonated my world. In that moment, time slowed. I thought of the nights I'd stayed awake helping him polish resumes, the mornings I'd covered rent when his job transition dragged on the promotion I'd declined because he wasn't ready to move cities. Sacrifices I had made without hesitation, because isn't that what love is, teamwork? And here he was, reducing me to safe, stable, boring. An outdated model upgraded at his convenience. A laugh, sharp and humorless, bubbled in my throat but never left. Instead, I swallowed hard, reached for my purse, and flagged the waiter. Happy birthday, Franklin, I said evenly. I paid the entire bill, over $400, including the custom cake I had ordered days earlier. My hands didn't tremble as I slid my card across the table, but my heart hammered so loud I thought the whole restaurant could hear. I left the wrapped watch box on the table unopened, a present he'd never deserve. Then I stood, lifted my glass halfway, and said with a calm smile that cost me everything, to your upgrade. And I walked out. The night air was crisp when I stepped outside. I clutched my coat tighter, my heels clicking against the pavement as though each step was a promise not to collapse. Behind me, laughter still floated from the restaurant, muffled through glass. I got into my car. On the passenger seat sat the little bakery box with his cake still sealed, a cruel reminder of the celebration that had turned into my humiliation. I turned the key engine, purring, and stared at the city lights reflecting in the windshield. My throat burned, my chest ached, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, this is the last time I'll pay for someone else's betrayal. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove into the night, unaware that this was only the beginning. Because upgrades, sometimes they come with glitches. And Franklin was about to learn that the hard way. When I got home that night, the silence of our apartment was unbearable. Every corner screamed of us, his jacket hanging carelessly on the chair. I'd bought his sneakers lined up beside mine by the door, the faint smell of his cologne lingering in the air. It should have felt familiar, comforting. Instead, it felt contaminated, like everything had been poisoned by that single word upgrade. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't even wait for him to come back so I could demand answers. Maybe part of me knew there was nothing left to save. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. Essentials only. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. My hands moved with robotic efficiency, while my chest felt heavy enough to crush me. On the kitchen counter, I left my apartment key and a note. 4 words only. Take care of yourself. No anger, no pleading, just an ending. That night, I crashed on my friend Lila's couch across town. She didn't ask questions right away, just handed me a blanket and a glass of water. I curled up, staring at the ceiling, the events of the night replaying like a cruel movie. Franklin's smirk. Olivia's laughter. The sting of being compared to some flashy new woman named Ava. My pillow grew damp, but I didn't sob loudly. The tears slid down quietly, like I didn't even deserve the release. The days that followed blurred together. I turned off my phone, muted every notification, and let the silence swallow me. But silence isn't empty, it's loud. It echoed with every memory of sacrifices I had made for Franklin. I remembered the time I turned down a promotion that would have meant relocating because he said, "I can't uproot my network here, Patricia. This city is where my career is taking off." I had smiled back then, kissed him, and said, "Of course." Or the week his laptop crashed right before a big interview, how I stayed up all night fixing it while he slept and then cheered him on the next morning. Moments where I had put him first, chosen us over me, and he had thrown it all away, dismissing me as predictable. The word dug deeper the more I thought about it. Predictable, boring, safe. Maybe I was those things, but didn't love need some predictability? Didn't stability matter? I questioned myself endlessly. Was I the problem? Had I been too steady, too dependable? Had I mistaken comfort for connection? After a week, Lila coaxed me into seeing a therapist. At first, I resisted. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle things alone. But the first session changed me. I sat in a warmly lit room across from a woman with kind eyes. The words spilled out before I could stop them. The birthday dinner, the toast, the public humiliation. I told her everything. My voice trembling, my hands twisting in my lap. When I finally fell silent, she leaned forward and said gently, "Patricia, you didn't lose him. He lost you. People who chase chaos call stability boring because they can't handle peace. But you are the kind of person who builds foundations. That's rare. That's powerful." Her words cracked something inside me. For the first time, I saw myself not as Franklin's leftovers, but as someone who had given without receiving. She ended the session with a line that would echo in my mind for months. "Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence." I clung to that. So I didn't call Franklin. I didn't text him. I didn't block him in a fit of rage. I simply vanished from his orbit. No drama, no scenes. Instead, I poured myself into rebuilding. I started hitting the gym again, not to change myself, but to feel stronger, more grounded in my own body. I journaled late at night, pages filling with hurt, anger questions, and eventually clarity. At work, I raised my hand for projects I would have once declined, too worried about balancing his needs with mine. Without him, there was no more excuse to hold myself back. And slowly the fog lifted. The pain dulled, though it never fully disappeared. I began to see the truth. Franklin had mistaken my loyalty for weakness. He had confused my consistency with complacency. But what he didn't realize was that the woman he called boring was also the woman who could walk away without looking back. One evening, weeks after the breakup, I found myself standing on Lila's balcony, staring out at the city lights. The same lights I'd stared at from my car the night I left that restaurant. But this time I wasn't whispering vows through tears. I was calm, steady. Franklin thought he had upgraded, but maybe the real upgrade was mine, choosing myself. I didn't know then what was coming or how the universe had its own way of balancing scales. But I could feel something shifting, and when it did, I would be ready. By the time 3 months had passed, I had started to breathe again. The nights weren't as heavy, the mornings didn't sting as much. My routines no longer revolved around Franklin's moods, his career dreams, or his late-night disappearances. I was, for the first time in years, living for myself. The apartment Lila helped me find was small, one-bedroom. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I picked the curtains. I arranged the books. I cooked meals that were only for me. The freedom was subtle but intoxicating. And just when I began to think Franklin had become a closed chapter, whispers of him started floating back into my life. The first was casual. At a coding meetup, I'd joined something I never would have done before I overheard a guy mentioning Ava, the so-called upgrade. He wasn't close to them, but he'd seen her posts online. Cryptic messages about betrayal, heartbreak, and learning who your real friends are. I smiled faintly to myself, though I kept my face neutral. It's starting, I thought. A week later, Lila came home from work with news. "You won't believe who I ran into," she said, tossing her bag on the couch. "That friend of Franklin's. What's her name? Olivia. The one who laughed the loudest that night." My body stiffened, but I kept chopping vegetables for dinner. What about her? She's distancing herself from him. Apparently, Franklin's new girl caught him cheating. With someone even newer, younger. The knife in my hand paused mid-slice. I let the information sink in the absurdity of it. Upgrading the upgrade. It was almost poetic. Later, through another mutual acquaintance, I learned the details. Ava had thought Franklin was her ticket to a glittering lifestyle. He'd promised her trips, conferences, networking opportunities. She posted photos of them together, playing the perfect couple. But behind the scenes, he was the same old Franklin. Half-truths, flattery, empty promises. He started canceling plans with her claiming work emergencies. He ghosted her for days. And then the truth spilled out. Ava caught him texting a woman from his office. Younger. Flirty messages with hotel room bookings to match. When she confronted him expecting remorse, Franklin just laughed. Relax, Ava. We're not that serious. You were fun, but come on, I'm not settling yet. Sound familiar? The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed out loud when I heard it. Those were nearly the same words he'd said to me. But Ava's downfall wasn't just emotional. It was financial. Franklin had convinced her to split costs for their adventures, hotel bills, event tickets, even flights for a conference he swore would change her career. When he ghosted her, she was left holding the invoices. She scrambled to cover them, maxing out cards, borrowing from friends. Her clients noticed the distraction. Missed deadlines, sloppy work, whispers spread through her own network that she was unreliable. She had burned herself out chasing Franklin's empty promises, and now she was left with nothing but debt and a reputation slipping through her fingers. And the friends, the same circle that clinked glasses at my humiliation, they were nowhere to be found. Olivia stopped answering her calls, claiming she was too negative. The others drifted away, muting her endless venting about Franklin. Without Franklin's shine, Ava was just a drain to them. It all unraveled in a matter of weeks. When I heard these stories, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't gloat online, didn't send Franklin a smug message. Instead, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea and let the quiet satisfaction wash over me. Because karma doesn't send notifications. It doesn't need announcements. It simply unfolds slowly and thoroughly until the person who thought they were untouchable finds themselves alone. The strange part, I felt no urge to take revenge. Not once did I think about sabotaging Franklin or warning Ava or exposing him to the world. I didn't have to. Life was doing it for me. Still, I won't pretend I didn't enjoy the irony. This was the man who had dismissed me as predictable. This was the man who thought stability was boring, that kindness was weakness. And yet here he was, spinning the same tired lines, repeating the same betrayals, leaving chaos in his wake. While I was finally learning what it felt like to be free. One evening, Lila looked at me across our kitchen table. "You don't even seem angry anymore," she said. I stirred my tea slowly. I was. But now, I just feel sorry for him. He keeps chasing excitement, thinking it'll make him feel alive. But you can't upgrade your way out of who you are. She leaned back, a small smile tugging at her lips. You know, Patricia, I think that's the best revenge of all. Watching him become his own downfall. I nodded, though in my heart I knew this wasn't the end. Because men like Franklin never vanish quietly. They circle back once the thrill is gone and the silence sets in. And I could feel it in my bones. He would come looking for me. I knew it was only a matter of time. Men like Franklin don't let go. Not because they love you, but because they hate losing the comfort they once mocked. It started one night with a notification I almost ignored. A DM on Instagram. His profile picture was the same smug grin, though thinner now, older somehow. Hey Patricia, hope you're doing well. Been thinking about you a lot. Miss our talks. I stared at the words for a long moment. My thumb hovered over the reply box, not with temptation, but with disbelief. Months had passed. He'd humiliated me, replaced me, discarded me like last season's phone model, and now here he was, fishing with a half-hearted hook. I didn't reply. A week later, another message appeared. I know I messed up. Ava was a mistake. Can we at least talk, just coffee? Still, I stayed silent. Then came the texts. Somehow he had kept my number. The first voicemail was tearful. Patricia, please. I feel so alone. You were always the one who listened. I don't have anyone now. I need you. The next voicemail turned sharp, almost accusatory. Why are you ignoring me after everything we had? This is cruel, Patricia. I thought you were better than this. Cruel. That word almost made me laugh. Cruel was being blindsided at a birthday dinner. Cruel was watching your partner toast to upgrading in front of strangers. I pressed delete without hesitation. But Franklin wasn't done. One afternoon, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Patricia. The voice was unmistakable, his mother, cold-clipped like she'd swallowed vinegar. This is Franklin's mother. He's devastated. Whatever happened between you two, family is family. You should at least hear him out. He's sorry, you know. I closed my eyes, my grip on the phone tightening. Family. The same family who never once called to congratulate me on promotions, who never thanked me for covering Franklin's bills. Now they expected me to play savior. I don't owe him anything, I said firmly, and hung up before she could finish. Days later, his sister messaged me on Facebook. Mia's going through hell. You owe him a conversation. Don't be a jerk about it. I blocked her instantly. The escalation came next. I was leaving work one afternoon when security called up from the lobby. There's someone here asking for you. I looked down from the glass balcony and saw him. Franklin, standing there with slumped shoulders, eyes bloodshot, clutching his phone like a lifeline. For a moment, my chest tightened. Not from longing, no. From the surrealness of it. To see him reduced from that arrogant man who smirked across a dinner table to this hollow figure. I went down, but I kept my distance, standing a good 10 feet away. Patricia, he said, voice cracking. Please, just 5 minutes. I crossed my arms. What could you possibly say to me that you didn't already say in front of your friends? He winced. I was stupid. Ava was a disaster. She used me, cheated, left me with nothing. My friends ditched me. They were never real. But you were real. You were the only one who cared. His words spilled out in a frantic rush, desperation dripping from every syllable. He even tried to step closer, but I held my ground. Don't rewrite history, Franklin, I said quietly. You didn't lose me. You threw me away. His jaw clenched. Why are you acting like I meant nothing after everything I gave you? I cut him off, my tone icy. Everything you gave me, Franklin, I carried us. I sacrificed for you, and you humiliated me to look powerful. Don't stand here pretending you were some great gift. The mask cracked then. His desperation flickered into anger. You're petty, he spat. Still holding on to that one dinner. You can't forgive, can you? I almost laughed. The absurdity of it. He thought forgiveness was owed, that all it took was him snapping his fingers. I shook my head, turned toward the elevators. No, Franklin, I just don't care anymore. He shouted after me, voice echoing in the lobby. You'll regret this. You'll end up alone. The elevator doors closed on his words, sealing me into blessed silence. That night, as I sat on my couch sipping tea, I thought about the therapist's words. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. She was right. My silence had driven Franklin to desperation. My indifference had done more damage than any confrontation ever could. And deep down, I knew he wasn't done. Men like Franklin never stop scratching at closed doors. But the difference was clear. I wasn't waiting on the other side anymore. If Franklin's reappearance had rattled me, I didn't let it last. The next morning, I poured all that restless energy into work. My company had been hinting at an upcoming promotion for months, but I'd always shied away from it before. Back when Franklin was in my life, I was constantly calculating how my choices might affect him. If I take this, will it upset his schedule? Will it mean moving cities? Will it bruise his ego? Now there was no one to consider but me. So when my manager asked if I was ready to lead a new project, I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said with a confidence that surprised even me. That yes marked the beginning of something bigger. The weeks that followed were busy, but not overwhelming. I found myself enjoying late nights at the office, collaborating with colleagues, taking pride in my independence. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by someone else's instability. I also started making new connections outside of work. The coding meetup I had joined became more than just a distraction. It became a place where I felt seen, valued, respected for my skills. There I wasn't Franklin's girlfriend or the predictable one. I was just Patricia. And that's where I met Arthur. Arthur wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type to brag about his job or show off expensive things. He was steady grounded with a dry wit that crept up on you unexpectedly. The first time he made me laugh, really laugh, it caught me off guard. I realized I hadn't felt that kind of lightness in a long time. We started as friends, coffee after meetups, quick lunches when schedules aligned. But there was no pressure, no hidden agenda, just conversation that flowed easily unforced. One evening, after walking me home, he paused at my doorstep. Patricia, he said, his voice calm. I like the way you don't try to impress anyone. You just are, and that's rare. The words nearly undid me. I had spent years with a man who belittled my steadiness, who turned my loyalty into a flaw. And here was someone calling it rare, precious. That night I cried not from sadness, but from relief. Dating Arthur wasn't like being with Franklin. There were no games, no dramatic highs and lows, no cruel tests of loyalty. With Franklin, I had been constantly bracing for the next storm. With Arthur, peace wasn't boring, it was safe. Safe in the best way. One night over dinner, I told him Franklin used to say I was predictable. Arthur smiled softly. Predictable can mean dependable. Dependable means trustworthy. That sounds like a strength, not a weakness. I held his gaze, my chest tightening with something warm. For the first time, I believed it. It wasn't just Arthur, though. Everything around me began to shift. I decorated my apartment with small touches that reflected who I was, not who I thought a partner wanted me to be. I framed photographs I'd taken years ago, picked out vibrant plants, even painted one wall a daring shade of teal. Lila noticed the difference one night when she came over. "You seem lighter," she said, curling up on my couch with a glass of wine. "I think I am," I admitted. "For so long, I thought being stable made me dull. But maybe it just means I finally know what I want." She grinned. "Sounds like someone's finally upgraded." We both laughed at the irony of it. Still, a small part of me knew the past wasn't done with me. Because men like Franklin don't just vanish into the background. They circle back again and again, trying to claw their way into the life you've rebuilt. And while I was finally moving forward with a career, I was proud of friendships that were genuine and a relationship rooted in peace. I could feel it. The storm wasn't over, it was just circling closer. But this time I wasn't afraid. It was almost a year to the day since Franklin's birthday dinner, the night my life cracked in half. By then the wound had long since closed. I had my promotion, my own apartment that finally felt like a home, and Arthur steady kind. Arthur by my side. So when a mutual friend from my coding circle invited us to a backyard party, I said yes without hesitation. It wasn't supposed to be anything dramatic, just grilling music laughter. I had no idea Franklin would be there. The night was warm, strings of lights glowing above the yard. People clustered in little groups, drinks in hand, voices rising over the hum of a playlist. Arthur squeezed my hand as we moved through the crowd, easy and relaxed. I was mid-conversation with a friend when I felt it. That shift in the air, the sudden hush in the corner of the yard. And then I saw him. Franklin. He looked different. Not the glowing, smug man who had once leaned back in his chair and toasted to upgrades. This version was thinner, his eyes hollowed, his posture sagging. He was dressed decently enough, but there was a tiredness clinging to him like a shadow. Our gazes locked, and for a split-second time folded in on itself. I was back at that restaurant, frozen forks suspended midair. But then I blinked, and the past dissolved. Because this time I wasn't alone. This time Arthur stood beside me, his hand steady in mine. Franklin froze, then moved quickly, too quickly, across the yard, ignoring Arthur completely. His voice cracked as he reached me. "Patricia, I didn't know you'd be here." I kept my expression calm, even polite. "Hello, Franklin." He swallowed, eyes darting nervously to the people nearby who had gone quiet watching. This is fate, right? We're meant to talk. I need to tell you, I'm sorry for everything. The dinner. Ava, all of it. I was wrong." His words spilled out like water from a broken dam. His voice was pleading, his hands shaking as though grasping for something he couldn't hold. "Please, Patricia," he continued louder now, his desperation carrying. "My life's a mess. No job stability, no real friends. I miss what we had. You were the best thing I ever had." The entire party had stilled their conversations, fading into silence. Even the music seemed dimmer. Everyone was watching, sensing the tension, like electricity in the air. Arthur shifted beside me, but didn't intervene. He trusted me to handle this. That trust gave me strength. I tilted my head slightly, letting a small smile tug at my lips. Not kind, not cruel, just measured. "Funny," I said softly. "I remember you toasting to upgrading. Didn't you say I was safe, stable, boring? That you deserve more?" His face flushed crimson, the memory clearly cutting through whatever excuse he had prepared. That was a mistake. I was influenced by people who didn't care about me. I see it now. They're all gone. But you, Patricia, you're real. Please just give me another chance." A murmur rippled through the group around us. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my response, the way they'd once waited for my reaction at that humiliating dinner. But tonight the stage was mine. I let the silence stretch just long enough for his words to hang in the air. Then I laughed lightly, shaking my head. "Hilarious, really. You humiliated me in public, and now here you are doing the same thing to yourself, begging me in front of everyone to undo the very choices you celebrated." His mouth opened closed like he was choking on words. "Patricia, please." I cut him off, my tone cool, almost mocking. "You called me predictable, Franklin. But let me tell you something. Predictability doesn't cheat. Predictability doesn't abandon you in debt. Predictability doesn't leave you alone at a party with no one to stand beside you." The crowd stirred soft laughter, weaving through the tension. Franklin's eyes darted to Arthur for the first time, as if only just realizing he was there. Who's he? Arthur didn't flinch. He simply squeezed my hand tighter. I smiled, this time warm and genuine, as I looked at Arthur. "This is Arthur, my real upgrade, one that doesn't come at the expense of my dignity." Franklin's shoulders sagged, his face twisting with humiliation. The onlookers weren't sympathetic. They watched him with quiet disdain, whispers passing like wildfire. For once, Franklin wasn't the center of admiration. He was the cautionary tale. I leaned in slightly, my voice low enough for only him to hear. You thought you were upgrading. But the truth is, Franklin, you've been downgrading your whole life. His eyes filled whether with anger or shame, I couldn't tell. But he couldn't hold my gaze. He turned abruptly, pushing past the crowd, disappearing into the shadows of the yard. As silence lingered, I raised my glass, smiling toward Arthur and the friends around us. To real upgrades, I said, clearly my voice carrying. The kind that don't humiliate you in public. Laughter rippled through the group, warm and genuine, sealing the moment. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt completely free. The party kept moving after Franklin fled, but the shift in energy lingered like perfume in the air. People whispered about what they'd just witnessed, some shaking their heads, others smirking. But me, I just felt lighter. For months I had carried the weight of his betrayal, his cruel words, the echo of laughter at that dinner table. Tonight all of that dissolved, because I hadn't just survived him, I had outgrown him. Later that night, as Arthur and I walked home hand in hand, he broke the silence. You didn't even flinch, he said, a note of admiration in his voice. I smiled faintly, because it wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. And I finally realized, he doesn't get to define me. Arthur squeezed my hand. He didn't say more, and he didn't need to. His quiet presence spoke louder than any words. But closure isn't always neat. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I debated letting it ring, but something in me wanted the final word. I answered. It was Franklin. His voice was raw, hoarse, half-broken. Patricia. Last night, I didn't mean for it to be like that. He sucked in a shaky breath. I don't know who I am without you. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I remembered the girl I had been sitting frozen at that restaurant, the one who paid his birthday bill while he toasted to an upgrade, and any pity I felt vanished. You know who you are, Franklin, I said coldly. You're the man who humiliated me to feel powerful, the man who traded stability for chaos, and now you're reaping exactly what you sowed. He tried again, his voice cracking. Just give me one more chance. I cut him off sharply. No, there are no more chances. I don't need revenge. I don't need your apology. What I needed, I already gave myself freedom. There was a long pause, then the line went dead. And just like that, I knew the chapter was truly closed. That evening, I stood by my window as the city lights flickered on. The reflection staring back at me wasn't the woman Franklin had dismissed as boring. It was a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece without him. I whispered into the glass almost like a prayer, "You don't get to haunt me anymore." The following weekend, Arthur and I went to a quiet cafe. Over coffee, I told him everything, the promotion I'd once turned down for Franklin, the years of sacrifice, the humiliation at that dinner. I laid it all bare. Arthur listened, patient and attentive. When I finally fell silent, he reached across the table, covered my hand with his, and said, "Patricia, he didn't upgrade. He downgraded. And you've upgraded in the best way possible. You chose yourself." His words sank deep, anchoring me in a truth I'd been circling for months. Franklin had taken my trust and twisted it into humiliation. But what he didn't understand was that humiliation can become fuel. Pain can become clarity. And clarity is closure. The next day I did something small but symbolic. I unboxed the custom watch I had once bought for him, the gift I'd left unopened at that restaurant table. It was still pristine, untouched. I took it to a pawn shop. The man behind the counter examined it, nodded, and slid cash across to me. It wasn't much compared to what I'd spent, but it felt like more than money. It felt like reclaiming something. I walked out of the shop lighter, freer, unshackled from the ghost of Franklin. From then on, whenever I thought about him, it wasn't with anger or longing. It was with detachment, the way you might think of a stranger you once passed on the street. He was irrelevant, and that was my closure. At another gathering, weeks later, someone mentioned his name in passing. Franklin. Yeah, I heard he's been bouncing between jobs. Doesn't stick to anything. Always chasing something better. I just sipped my drink, smiled faintly, and said nothing. Because the truth was clear, I didn't need to defend myself anymore. I didn't need to prove anything. The contrast between us spoke for itself. He was still chasing upgrades, and I had already found mine. As I curled up with Arthur that night, his arm draped around me, I realized something profound. Closure isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about indifference. And I had finally reached it. A year after that humiliating dinner, I finally understood something I wish I'd known sooner. Stability isn't boring. Stability is freedom when you're with the right person. Franklin used to call me predictable. He thought I was safe routine, dependable to a fault. And maybe I was. But what he didn't realize is that predictability is what you build a life on. It's the foundation for trust, for peace, for love that doesn't collapse the moment a shiny distraction appears. He called it dull. Arthur calls it rare. That difference is everything. When I look back now, I don't feel anger, not even regret. Because without Franklin's betrayal, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have kept shrinking myself to fit inside his world, mistaking sacrifice for love, mistaking chaos for passion. But life has a funny way of teaching lessons. Karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, waiting for the right moment to flip the script. And when it does, you don't even have to lift a finger. Franklin humiliated me once. A year later, he humiliated himself, chasing upgrades until there was nothing left but emptiness. All while I found my upgrade without looking. Peace, stability, love that feels like coming home instead of walking on eggshells. One evening, not long ago, Arthur and I walked past the very restaurant where Franklin's birthday dinner had taken place. The lights still glowed warm, couples still laughed over pasta and champagne. I stopped for a moment, staring through the glass. For a split second, I saw myself there again, smiling, hopeful, a wrapped gift, burning a hole in my purse, unaware of the storm about to break. But then Arthur's hand brushed mine steady and gentle, and the memory faded into nothing. I whispered under my breath, almost like a farewell, "Thank you for teaching me what not to accept." And then I walked on without looking back. To anyone listening, I'll say this. Never let someone convince you that kindness is weakness or that stability is dull. The people who mock those things are usually the ones running from their own emptiness. The truth. Kindness is rare, loyalty is priceless, and stability isn't boring. It's the quiet, steady rhythm that lets love flourish. Franklin thought he'd upgraded, but the only thing he upgraded to was chaos. Me, I upgraded to myself first. And then when I was ready to a partner who saw me as enough exactly as I am. So here's my final toast, not to revenge, not to regret, but to freedom. Because some upgrades come with glitches, mine came with peace.